Welcome to worship with the Unitarian Universalist community of Charlotte. I'm Jay Leach. I'm one of this community's ministers, and my pronouns are he, him, his. In our introductory slide today, you saw an image from the U.S. artist Jean-Léon Jerome Ferris. Ferris created a series of images in the first third of the 20th century, others of which we'll be seeing today, depicting scenes from U.S. history. Writing about these images, Doris Devine Finelli and Carrie Dethorne called it art that confuses verity with verisimilitude. These pictures, they said, formed a bridge between fact and fiction, over which the viewers were willing travelers, and admit that they tell more about the era in which they were produced than they reveal about the events they portray. Keep that in mind as you see today's art, the way these images misremember, misrepresent, offer the kind of aggrandizing self-image that rests on a dubiously inaccurate foundation. They represent for us today a challenging awareness that the very recent call to tell the truth about our history upsets these grandiose depictions, forcing us to face and acknowledge more difficult realities. Ben Railton, in an audaciously titled essay, Considering History, Let's Remember All of American History in 2021, admits as much. These multi-layered, often contradictory, and always challenging American histories are far more difficult to remember, much less to commemorate. But that makes it, he says, all the more important that we begin to do better remembering them, pushing back on those myths and seeking the past with more nuance, more accuracy, and more meaning. So today's service continues the focus from last week on remembering, but in a very different way, pivoting from last Sunday's awareness and attention to the sad reality of personal memory loss. Today we'll confront an equally troubling reality, that of choosing to misremember and misrepresent. If you're a visitor, welcome. This is just the kind of challenge we offer as a community, a search for truth that makes us uneasy at times. We hope you'll find meaning in today's service and that you'll consider reaching out to Kelly Green, who is our membership coordinator, for a conversation about it. If you're a member, thank you. Thank you for participating today and for continuing to support a community whose mission initiates with those words, challenged by our liberating faith. To greet one another, go to our public Facebook page and post your personal welcome as you experience the first of the musical offerings from our member, Pete Moore. Welcome.
Oh, my name it ain't nothing. My age it means less. The country I come from is called the Midwest. I was taught and brought up there, the laws to abide, that the land that I live in has God on its side. Oh, the history books tell it, they tell it so well. The cavalry's charged, the Indians fell. The cavalry's charged, the Indians died. Oh, the country was young then and had God on its side. The Spanish American, the war had its day, and the Civil War too was soon laid away. In the names of the heroes I was made to memorize, with guns in their hands and God on their side. First World War, boys, well, it came and it went. The reason for fighting I never did get, but I learned to accept it. Oh, accept it with pride. For you don't count the dead when you got God on your side. The Second World War, it came to an end. We forgave the Germans and then we were friends. Though they murdered 6 million in those ovens they fried. The Germans now do have God on their side. I've learned to hate the Russians all through my whole life. If another war comes, it's them we must fight. To hate them and fear them, to run and to hide, and accept it all bravely, with God on our side. But now we got weapons of chemical dust. If fire them we're forced to, then fire them we must. One push of the button and a shot the world wide. And you never ask questions when God's on your side. Through many a dark hour, I've been thinking about this. How Jesus Christ was betrayed by a kiss. But I can't think for you. You'll have to decide whether Judas Iscariot had God on his side. So now as I'm leaving, I'm weary as hell. The confusion I'm feeling ain't no tongue can tell. The words fill my head and then fall to the floor. That if God's on our side, then He'll stop the next war.
We kindle again today the light of our chalice sacred symbol of our liberating faith. Today, may its light shine as a beacon of truth, shining into hidden places, overlooked places, places ignored and denied and avoided. And may it light our way, guiding us to courageous connections as agents of the change we long to see. For several years now, I've had the honor of serving on the editorial board of Skinner House, our Unitarian Universalist publishing house. In our most recent meeting, one of the topics of conversation was the possibility of a reprint of a 2011 Skinner House publication called Encounters. It's subtitled Poems About Race, Ethnicity, and Identity. I'll be reading today selections from Encounters, beginning first with a poem from Gregory Jenikian entitled In the Elementary School Choir. I had never seen a cornfield in my life. I'd never been to Oklahoma, but I was singing as loud as anyone. Oh, what a beautiful morning. The corn is as high as an elephant's eye. Though I knew something about elephants, I thought, coming from the same continent they did, and they being more like camels than anything else. And when we sang Meet Me in St. Louis, clang, clang, clang went the trolley, I remembered the ride from Ramla Station in the heart of Alexandria, all the way to Rushdie, where my grandmother lived. The autos on the roadway vying with mule carts and bicycles, the Mediterranean half a mile off on the left, the air smelling sharply of diesel and salt. It was a problem which had dogged me for a few years, the confusion of places. And when in fifth grade geography, I had pronounced Des Moines as though it were a village in France, Mr. Kephart led me to the map on the front wall, and so I'd know where I was, pressed my forehead squarely against Iowa. Des Moines, he said, rhymes with coin. Now we were singing zippity-doo-dah, zippity-day. And every song we'd sung had in it either sun or bluebirds, fair weather or fancy fringe. Oh, beautiful America. And one tier below me, there was Linda DeMere with her amber waves and lovely fruited plains, and she was part of America too, along with the sun and spacious sky, though untouchable and as distant as purple mountains of majesty. This is my country, we sang, and a few years ago there would have been a scent of figs in the air, mangoes, and someone playing the oud along a clear stream. But now it was my country, 'tis of thee. And I sang it out with all my heart, and now with Linda DeMere in mind, land where my fathers died, I bellowed. and it was not hard to imagine a host of my great uncles and grandfathers stunned from their graves in the Turkish interior and finding them suddenly on a rock among maize and poultry, and Squanto shaking their hands. How could anyone not think America was exotic when it had Massachusetts and the long tables of Thanksgiving? And how could it not be home if it were the place where love first struck? We had finished singing. The sun was shining through large windows on the beatified faces of all who had sung well and with feeling. We were ready to file out and march back to our room where Mr. Kephart was waiting. Already Linda DeMere had disappeared into the high society of the hallway. One day, I was going to tell her something. Des Moines, I was saying to myself, Baton Rouge, Terre Haute, Boise. Believe it or not, I can actually recall when, as young kindergartners, we went down to a basement room in the Eastland Baptist Church to stage our own little Thanksgiving feast, replete with simple construction paper costumes. But with the passage of not a few years, the details of that reenactment have faded from my memories. I can't even remember which part I played. What I'm absolutely certain of is this. We told an incomplete, fabricated story. The tale of the Plymouth Colony isn't just about a feast featuring religious freedom-seeking pilgrims and beneficent, if also benighted, Native Americans. Had we been committed to the real story, rather than a carefully culled and cultivated morality tale, one reflecting a long-standing commitment to misremembering and intentional forgetting, we just might not have had our little feast at all. After all, would they really have wanted us to admit that tracing one's lineage back to the Mayflower means that your forebear may have been a member of a separatist religious sect, or a fare-paying passenger unmotivated by any particular religious conviction, or a servant, or a crew member, or a child? Not even half the people on board the Mayflower were pilgrims hoping to establish a place where they could freely practice their religion. And the notion that they were renegades, courageously breaking free from the bounds of the monarchy and its state religion? Well, Expeditions to the North American territory claimed by Great Britain required a charter from the king. They didn't sneak off. They needed and received royal permission. And how did they get their charter? Through merchant adventurers who paired investors with expeditions in what was essentially a joint stock venture, hoping for a handsome return on their investments. And some of the same wealthy, let's call them what they were, venture capitalists who had already funded the earlier expedition to Jamestown put up the money for the Plymouth expedition in hopes of turning a profit. Also, a group of colonizers could lay claim to a land on which the Wampanoag and other Algonquin peoples had been living for thousands and thousands of years. And before long, these allegedly freedom-seeking people were enslaving the Wampanoag and well on their way to establishing the Massachusetts colony as the first colony to institute slavery through legislation. Yes, enslaving human beings was a part of the economy of Massachusetts for over a century and a half. Not exactly the halcyon scene we saw from the 20th century U.S. artist Jean-Léon Jerome Ferris, or the one we enacted in our kindergarten class. All of that aside, there's an even more problematic reality with our carefully cultivated founding story of the Mayflower. These colonizers were latecomers. Historian Annette Gordon Reed, in her tome, The Hemmingses of Monticello, explains. It's hard to associate the earliest Virginians who controlled society with any aspiration loftier than making a killing. The colony was, after all, founded by the Virginia Company. It was from the beginning a money-making enterprise, a place for men seeking their fortunes with limited references to spirituality and no nod to sentimentality, and apparently very few limits on how money-making could proceed. This was probably why, for most Americans, the national narrative begins at Plymouth Rock instead of Jamestown, even though the Virginia fortune seekers arrived more than a decade before the Pilgrims. On that long, long ago November day, down in that Baptist church basement, we weren't enacting history. We were engaged in a sanitized, euphemized exercise in misremembering, willful forgetting, wishful thinking, a fantasy that still, decades later, some continue to offer as a tale much preferable to the truth. Just listen to these words from a speech earlier this year from former Senator and now CNN commentator Rick Santorum. He said, if you think about this country, I don't know of any other country in the world that was settled predominantly by people who were coming to practice their faith. They came here because they were not allowed to practice their particular faith in their own country. And so they came here, mostly from Europe, and they set up a country that was based on Judeo-Christian principles. That's what our founding documents are based on. It's in our DNA. Santorum continued, we came here and created a blank slate. We birthed a nation from nothing. There was nothing here. Yes, we have Native Americans, but candidly, there isn't much Native American culture in American culture. It was born of the people who came here pursuing religious liberty, to practice their faith, to live as they ought to live, and to have the freedom to do so. Religious liberty. These are the two bulwarks of America, faith and freedom. You hear it all the time about faith and freedom, but it is what makes America unique in the world. It's a tale that would be so much more compelling if it didn't require profligate engagement in misremembering. A second selection from Encounters, Matinee by Susan Clements. 2 o'clock on a Saturday afternoon in November, your father drops you off near the worn steps of the Manor Movie House, the marquee blinking a relay of hot lights and foot-high letters you are too young to read. You clutch your silver quarter tight in your small hand as your father reaches past you and pushes open the car door, nudges you out with his smile to where other children crowd up to the box office, screaming and yelling in their bright coats. You remember the phrase, "Let's pretend," that the new girl on your street taught you through the summer, always wanting you to play hateful house, to pretend tameness when your own blood ran wild with foxes and invisible deer. Still, you fell in love with the word pretend. Now you are a sleeping beauty, glittering your way through an ancient war of rough bodies until you reach the theater's magical cave, hunched down in a torn seat in the front row, lifting your face to the safety of the blank screen. You drift among smells of hot balls, jujubes, and cherry dots, hotness and sweetness of 100 tongues, savory, salty popcorn from a cardboard carnival box. In the musty shadows, the screen swells with Hollywood Technicolor, cowboys and Indians, Indians swooping down on painted ponies, scalping innocent whites, raising even your hair as you sit, petrified by war whoops and swirling hatchet blades and brown faces webbed with black. Like the other children, you cheer, throw popcorn when the good cowboys kill every Indian at movie's end, and the hero in his white hat points out the only good Indian is a dead one. You stumble outdoors, wedged in the crowd. A dark-eyed boy pulls your long hair, and just as you get ready to kill him, you spot your father waiting for you in his old car. You climb in and tell him how horrible Indians are. He listens as the first snow of the year starts to fall, turns on the windshield wipers as you both yield in silence to their measured slaps, ice crystals melting inward on the window glass. Christmas bulbs strung along bare wires over Main Street shimmer, blue, green, red in the snow dusk. Your grandfather was an Indian. Your father says at last. You're part Indian. Indians were here first, like the first snow. You cross your arms as he backs out into a cloud of smoke. The snow drops into the lights of town like feathers from a vast and wounded bird. Pretend, pretend you glitter as you fall. It's hard to remember. That statement has at least two very different meanings. One suggests haziness, uncertainty, inadequate recall, limited access. When our kid came to me asking for my assistance with ninth grade math, my claim was apt. It's hard to remember. To be sure, a long, long time ago, I knew the formulas, could solve the problems. I actually passed math classes. But now, faced with the need to offer help, well, it's hard to remember. That claim, however, may mean something quite different. It's hard to remember may mean not that we cannot recall, but that doing so makes us uncomfortable. Sometimes it's hard to remember actually means I would rather just try to even pretend to forget. Or where a group, even a whole nation, is concerned, we would rather misremember, willfully forget, deny, prevaricate, overlook, ignore. That was in part the message in a New York Times opinion piece just this week. Charles Blow even titled his essay, "History Can Be Erased. It Often Has Been." Such erasure, he wrote, is how propaganda is born and history is buried. It's shockingly easy to do and has often been done. Citing the 1921 Tulsa race riots, in which rampaging white people killed 300 black Tulsans and left an estimated 8,000 homeless, Blow contends, one of the most remarkable things about this massacre was the concerted effort by the city to erase it from history, and just how effective that campaign was. As someone sardonically noted, no one has ever failed the AP history exam for failing to recall the details of the Tulsa race riots. And that's no accident. The New York Times reported after the massacre, officials set about erasing it from the city's historical account. Victims were buried in unmarked graves, police records vanished, the inflammatory Tulsa Tribune articles were cut out before the newspapers were transferred to microfilm. It was a century head start on the cancel culture that suddenly seems to be of such concern to some. City officials cleansed the book so thoroughly that when Nancy Feldman started teaching her students at the University of Tulsa about the massacre in the late 1940s, they didn't believe her. Charles Blow opines, we sometimes underestimate human impulses and human nature when we simply assume that the memory of a thing, a horrible thing, will last forever. And Blow cites as examples how horrible Christopher Columbus actually was, or the massacres of native people and all the broken treaties that helped grow the geography of this country, or how many of the pioneers of gay rights were trans people and drag queens. Katie Robertson shared the Times opinion page with Blow this past week, writing about the decision of the Board of Trustees at Chapel Hill to deny tenure to Pulitzer Prize-winning writer Nikole Hannah-Jones. Hannah-Jones, as some of us know, was central to the Times Magazine's 1619 Project. But alas, the 1619 Project dared to remember, to tell truths some would prefer to deny. After all, she began her essay with these ominous sentences. In August of 1619, notice, it was before the Mayflower landed. In August of 1619, a ship appeared on this horizon near Port Comfort, a coastal port in the English colony of Virginia. It carried more than 20 enslaved Africans who were sold to the colonists. No aspect, she writes, of the country that would be formed here has been untouched by the years of slavery that followed. On the 400th anniversary of this fateful moment, it is finally time to tell the story truthfully. Or not, says one Mitch McConnell. In a letter to Secretary of Education Miguel Cardona, McConnell decried the use of the 1619 Project in public schools, referring to it as ill-advised advocacy, a slanted story, divisive nonsense, and activist indoctrination that fixates solely on past flaws and splits our nation into divided camps. Working overtime to try to talk us into forgetting, the Kentucky Republican declared, Americans do not need or want their tax dollars diverted from promoting the principles that unite our nation toward promoting radical ideologies that are meant to divide us. Because evidently, better a united embrace of misremembering than an uncomfortable choice to finally tell the truth.
Born down in a dead man's town. The first kick I took was when I hit the ground. End up like a dog that's been beat too much, till you spend half your life just a covering up and down. Born in the USA, I was born in the USA. Born in the USA, I was. Got in a little hometown jail, so they put a rifle in my hand, sent me off to foreign land to go and kill the yellow man now. Born in the USA, I was born in the USA. Born in the USA, I was. Come back home to the refinery. Hiring man said, son, if it was up to me. Went down to see my VA man. He said, son, don't you understand? Had a brother at Quezon, fighting off them Viet Cong. They're still there, he's all gone. He had a woman he loved in Saigon. I got a picture of him in her arms. shadow of the penitentiary, out past the gas fires of the refinery. 10 years burning down the road, I got nowhere to run, nowhere to go. Born in the USA, born in the USA, I was born in the USA. I'm a cool rockin' daddy in the USA. Born in the USA, I was born in the USA. I was. I was.
In part today, we share our common concerns for our world, our nation, our community, concerns rooted in the deep values we share. As violence further rends life in Palestine and Israel, we join with those calling for an end to reckless attacks on unarmed citizens, even as we echo those who refuse to indulge in false equivalencies. The cries of the Palestinians for dignity, for equality, for justice align with that which we hold most dear, and cause many of us to join with those urging far more courage among our own leaders. We hear other cries today, those defending the right of a woman to have autonomy over her own body, those calling for an end on the attack on our trans siblings, those rallying for justice for victims of police-initiated violence, those summoning us to environmental justice. We are here as a community not just to challenge, but also to console, to call to our better selves while sharing concerns when life turns hard. That is why we name into this service those in need and invite personal responses beyond this time. Today, our collective prayers are for Michael Amy Sira in concern for her mother's health. Chris Clark, Denise Weldon Clark, and their family as they mourn the recent deaths of Chris's aunt and uncle. And Becky Whittington as she recovers from a medical procedure and endures ongoing health challenges. Most of our members are aware by now of the profound loss we experienced this week as a community. Our beloved magical minstrel, former director of music Dale Brooke, died on Monday evening of this week. I know I am not alone in shedding tears of sorrow and joy in these past few days. Oh, what a gift Dale was to us, and how fortunate we were to have him as a part of our community for so long. He would have us sing and dance and celebrate, this we know. But for now, we also grieve. And we extend our loving sympathy to Sage Brooke and Darrell Whittle and to their whole family in this time of loss. One of the many, many things I loved so much about Dale was his unrelenting, generous support of our community. He believed in us, and he and Sage have been extraordinarily generous in their support. They're not alone. Others of you have continued to give with gratitude. I invite all of us to join them in sustaining our community with the most generous support possible. Thank you. Poet Amanda Gorman, writing 4 years ago for a Library of Congress event, ended American Lyric with these lines. There's a place where this poem dwells. It is here. It is now. In the yellow song of dawn's bell, where we write an American lyric, we are just beginning to tell. That's our commitment, both as a congregation and as the larger Unitarian Universalist movement. To listen to the Amanda Gormans and Nicole Hannah-Joneses, to the Brian Stevensons and the Ta-Nehisi Coates, to the Angela Davises and the Kimberly Crenshaws, to the Jericho Browns and the Claudine Rankins, even when they make us very uncomfortable. Even when they remove some of our heroes from their pedestals and expose them and the ways they participated in, even led acts of oppression and inhumanity. Even when we denounce what we thought we were doing right and call us out for impact inconsistent with intent. Even when they ask us to forego forgetting, refuse denial, give up the easy path of misremembering, and face truths long ignored and avoided. That's been the focus of our core groups and of other educational opportunities and of the summons we have sounded regularly in our services. It has been challenging, and it has forced us to face things that have made some of us very uneasy. To admit that the culture that we helped to create and sustain is rooted deeply in now undeniable white supremacy. Oh, there will continue to be the Santorums and the McConnells, the trustees at Chapel Hill, those dominant culture voices offering seductive messages. Why dig up all these unpleasant things about, they'll say, people who were just products of their time? Why continue asking the implications about portions of our history for which none of us were personally responsible? What good does it do for us to know that, for example, just as New York's Central Park is built on the destruction of Seneca Village, a thriving Black neighborhood, so too parts of Charlotte's shimmering uptown rest on the ruins of dismantled Brooklyn, another thriving Black neighborhood. Why these purveyors of forgetfulness will ask us again and again, why remember all that? We who believe in truth and who believe that knowing the truth is a step toward justice and freedom and equity must not rest. We who believe in truth must not rest. For in our remembering, we are remembered, offered a better opportunity to become, as we aspire to be, that more perfect union, guided by our better angels. We who believe in truth must not rest. For our meditation today, a final reading from Encounters, Joy Harjo's poem, Reconciliation, a Prayer. We gather by the shore of all knowledge, as peoples who were put here by a God who wanted relatives. This God was lonely for touch and imagined herself as a woman with children to suckle, to sing with, to continue the web of the terrifyingly beautiful cosmos of her womb. This God became a father who wished for others to walk beside him in the belly of creation. This God laughed and cried with us as a sister at the sweet tragedy of our predicament. Foolish humans. Or built a fire as a brother to keep us warm. This God who grew to love us became our lover, sharing tables of food enough for everyone in this whole world. O sun, moon, stars, our other relatives peering at us from the inside of God's house. Walk with us as we climb into the next century naked, but for the stories we have of each other. Keep us from giving up in this land of nightmares, which is also the land of miracles. We sing our song, which we've been promised has no beginning or end. All acts of kindness are lights in the war for justice. We gather up these strands broken from the web of life. They shiver with our love as we call them the names of our relatives and carry them to our home made of the four directions and sing. Of the South, where we feasted and were given new clothes. Of the West, where we gave up the best of us to the stars as food for the battle. Of the North, where we cried because we were forsaken by our dreams. Of the East, because returned to us is the spirit of all that we love. And finally, to close, words from my friend and colleague, the Reverend Mark Morrison Reed. The central task, Mark writes, the central task of the religious community is to unveil the bonds that bind each to all. There is a connectedness, a relationship discovered amid the particulars of our own lives and the lives of others. Once felt, it inspires us to act for justice. It is the religious community that assures us that we are not struggling for justice on our own, but as members of a larger community. The religious community is essential, for alone our vision is too narrow to see all that must be seen, and our strength too limited to do all that must be done. Together, our vision widens, and our strength is renewed. Go with courage.
As I went walking that ribbon of highway, I saw above me that endless skyway. I saw below me that golden valley. This land was made for you and me. This land is your land, this land is my land. From California to the New York Island, from the Redwood Forest to the Gulf Stream waters. This land was made for you and me. I roamed and rambled, and I followed my footsteps to the sparkling sands of her diamond desert. And all around me a voice was sounding. This land was made for you and me. There was a big high wall there that tried to stop me. A sign was painted, said no trespassing. But on the other side, it didn't say nothing. That side was made for you and me. When the sun comes shining, then I was strolling in wheat fields waving and dust clouds rolling. A voice was chanting as the fall was lifting. This land was made for you and me. One bright sunny morning, in the shadow of the steeple by the relief office, I saw my people as they stood hungry. I stood there wondering if God blessed America for me. Nobody living can ever stop me as I go walking that freedom highway. And nobody living can ever make me turn back. This land was made for you and me. This land is your land, this land is my land. From California to the New York Island, from the Redwood Forest to the Gulf Stream waters. This land was made for you and me. This land was made for you and me.